Her scream didn't sound human at first. It sounded like something torn loose. The biker crew stopped mid-sentence. The girl crashed into them, gasping, "They're hurting her. Please, please hurry." Nobody questioned her. Nobody blinked. Engines roared before anyone even grabbed their helmets. "They're beating my mama." Lily's small voice cut the cold night. She was barefoot on the gravel, hair wild, tears streaking down her cheeks. A paper bag slipped from her hand, and the coins inside clinked like tiny alarms. The bikers turned. Engines hummed down to a low growl. Caleb was the nearest. He had a scar along his jaw and a slow way of smiling that made people trust him. He pushed his helmet back and stood up straight. Around him, the others, Hank, Rosa, and Marcus, watched Lily as if the word itself had struck them. The gas station light flickered. A neon sign hummed. Somewhere in the dark, a van's tires skidded away. Lily kept pointing down the road, voice trembling. "They hit her. They please." She could not finish. Her small fist tightened around a folded scrap of cloth, a tiny thing with a faded star stitched on it. Caleb felt the talk in his bones, the silent rule their town obeyed. Bullies only took once if you let them. He looked at his crew. He looked at Lily. The night tightened. Something heavy rose in him and did not let go. What happened next shocked everyone and set off a chain of events no one saw coming. Stay with me, this is a story you need to hear. Before we start the story, comment below and let us know where in the world you're watching from today. And if you find this story impactful, don't forget to subscribe for more. Caleb knew every inch of Route 9 by heart. He knew where the blacktop crept over the hill and where the old sycamore leaned like a tired guard. He knew which houses left their porch lights on and which kept their curtains closed. He knew the names of the men who worked the night shifts and the kids who skipped school to play pool at Marjorie's. That knowledge was his small kingdom. He worked at the garage on Willow Lane. The shop smelled like oil and hot metal. Caleb liked fixing engines. He liked the honest noise of a motor waking up. He had a steady hand and an old habit of humming while he worked. People from town brought their cars to him because they trusted him, not because he had a sign that said best price. He never took advantage. The bikers gathered at the back of the garage most nights. They sat on crates, drank coffee from thermoses, and talked about small things. Hank told bad jokes. Marcus teased Rosa about her leather gloves. The crew was rough, but steady. They helped neighbors when trucks broke down. They shoveled driveways after bad storms. That was their code. Take care of the ones who belong to this place. Caleb had a soft spot for kids. He kept a small box of little toys and candy near the counter. He fixed bikes for $1. When Lily first showed up, barefoot and trembling, he saw a child who had no place to be safe. He bent down to her level without thinking. He put a hand on her shoulder. She clutched a folded scrap of cloth, so tight the star stitched on it was crumpled. That tiny cloth became a new thing in Caleb's head. It was a simple scrap with a faded star. It smelled faintly of laundry soap and something floral. Caleb thought of his sister Naomi when he saw it. Naomi wore a similar star patch on a jacket when she was small. She had died years ago in a night where Caleb thought he could have done more. That memory sat like a small rock in his chest. He still carried guilt like a pebble in his pocket. Did he deserve the peace he had now? Could he live with himself if he let a child go back to danger? Marjorie, the gas station owner, watched from behind the counter. She was in her 60s and had a face that told the town stories. She flicked the cigarette butt into an ashtray and raised one eyebrow. "Trouble," she mouthed without moving her lips. Eddie, an old man in a pickup, stood by his truck with his cap pulled low. He had been a witness to more than one street fight in his time. He touched his chin and did nothing. Outside, a teenage couple rolled down their car window and stared. They whispered like witnesses who liked spectacle. Those people were the town's small jury. Some stayed. Some looked away. The way they watched made a person feel bigger and smaller at the same time. Caleb felt their eyes on him, and it split him. He wanted to do what was right. He also didn't want to bring a storm down on Lily or on the town. At the garage, Caleb had another habit. He kept his father's old wrench on the bench. The wrench was heavy and worn. He used it for stubborn bolts. But more than that, it was a symbol. His father had taught him to be careful with promises. If you give your word, you carry it, his father said. The wrench reminded Caleb of that line. He had promised Naomi something he had failed to keep. He had promised himself not to fail anyone else. Rosa poured hot coffee into 3 paper cups and passed one to Caleb. Her eyes were steady. She had a small scar on her wrist and a laugh that came like a breath. Rosa had been in too many fights to count, but she kept a quiet kindness under her leather. Marcus fiddled with his ring. Hank chewed on a toothpick. They all listened as Lily told her story in short gasps. "They hit my mama," she said again, voice high with the kind of terror that makes you small. Caleb crouched beside her and looked where she pointed. The streetlight showed a smear of motion farther down the road. A van like a dark whale had already gone. He could imagine what had happened because his town had its share of men who thought they were above saying sorry. That image made something turn inside him. He had choices. He could call the police and hand the mess to them. He could do nothing. Or he could act like he had acted before, fast, rough, and final. The crew waited for his word. They trusted him because he thought before he struck. That trust felt heavy now. What would he choose? Would he let the law handle it? Or would he carry his father's wrench and the debt to Naomi into the dark with Lily in his arms? The night held its breath. Caleb dialed the police with fingers that trembled a little. He sat on the bumper of his truck and watched Lily hug her knees. The wrench lay heavy beside him, metal warm from his palm. He moved it, then put it back. The town felt thin and quiet, like paper ready to tear. 911, what is your emergency? The voice said, calm and tired. Caleb told the story fast. He told where the van had gone. He said a woman had been hit. He said a little girl was crying. He gave names and places. He tried not to sound like a man about to cross a line. There was a pause. The voice on the other end asked a few questions, then sighed. "We'll send a car when we can." It did not sound urgent. Caleb felt cold. He told them again. "She's hurt. They left just now. Please." The dispatcher clicked her pen. "Sir, we have higher priority calls. If it's safe, stay put. Describe the van if you can." Caleb told her the van had no logo. It was dark, older model with dents. He heard typing, then a soft chuckle close to him. Hank trying to break the awful quiet with a joke. Caleb did not laugh. He hung up and stared at the line of dark road. Marjorie came out with a thermos and pushed it at him. "They'll take their time," she said. Her voice was small for someone who ran the gas station like a dock for weary people. "This town protects its own." She did not look at him when she said it, but he knew what she meant. There were people here who paid for protection. There were men with money and a soft tie to the law. In that silence he felt the town's true shape. Some names bent rules, and others learned to look down. Eddie spat tobacco and said, "You ever try to bother the wrong man, you get the shrug. Folks keep mouths shut." He had the air of someone who had seen bargains where justice lost. The teenage couple in the car rolled their eyes and whispered about trouble they'd rather not touch. People watched Lily like a small play. Sympathy was there, but not the kind that changed things. Caleb thought of the wrench and of Naomi. He thought of promises. He thought of living under rules and breaking them twice. His throat tightened. He wanted to believe the police would answer. He wanted to avoid putting a child near bigger danger. He wanted to protect. He wanted to be careful. All of that pressed in. Then Marcus walked up carrying a flashlight. He'd been down the road for a minute. He shook his head when he came back. "It wasn't just random men," he said quietly. "A neighbor saw the van. It's the same kind of vans Hayes uses." He didn't say much more. The name landed like a stone. Hayes was the richest man in town. He owned a strip of rental units and a contracting business. He had a smile that smoothed problems and men who worked for him. People paid him to fix things. People paid him to stop fights. People paid him to look away. Caleb's hands went cold. If Hayes was involved, the problem was not just a street scuffle. It was a power problem. It could bring men from the law, who moved slow, and men from Hayes, who moved fast. The bikers exchanged looks. Rose's jaw tightened. Hank's laugh died in his throat. The night seemed to tighten around them. A witness across the street, the barber Jonah, leaned out his door and called, "Don't go chasing that, Caleb. Not worth it." His voice was weaker than the warning. He had a small shop and a wife who liked him alive. His words were meant to stop trouble. They made Caleb feel small for a moment. But Lily looked up at him with eyes that had already seen too much. "They beat her," she said. "My mama, she can't walk." The child's words were plain and true. The world boiled down to one face. Caleb felt something break inside that had nothing to do with men named Hayes. He thought of the choice again. Call the police and wait, and maybe nothing would happen. Chase the van and risk a fight with hired men and the law. Do nothing and carry the guilt. The wrench felt like a scale in his hand, heavy and honest. Caleb stood. He put the wrench into his jacket. "Not today," he said, voice low and steady. The words were simple. They were a promise and a warning. Hank read him like a map. "What's the plan?" he asked. Caleb looked at the road. He looked at Lily, and then at the faces around him. "Find her," he said. "Bring her back." It was small. It was huge. It set everyone moving. Someone in the shadows watched and walked away. The sound of keys in a pocket made Caleb look up. The watcher was a neighbor called Ruth. She had a habit of listening. Her steps were measured as she left. People like her carried news. That small motion left a knot in Caleb's stomach. The town was awake now. A secret could move fast in hands that wanted to keep it. As they climbed into trucks and saddled bikes, Caleb felt the old fear again. Were they walking into danger that no wrench could fix? He remembered his father's voice about promises. He remembered Naomi's laugh. He remembered Lily's star cloth in her small hand. The road was dark. The night had a shape. The first seed of the fight had been planted. What grew next would not be small. They found Marta, where the road rolled down into the row of rental units Hayes owned. The building smelled of bleach and old cooking. Lights flickered in the hall. A child's laugh came from somewhere, thin and frightened. Lily kept close to Caleb's leg, the little star cloth pressed to her mouth like a talisman. They moved quiet at first. Caleb thought they would be ghosts slipping past men and doors. But the truth of a place like this was louder than they expected. A neighbor swept his stoop and watched with a face that said he would tell no one. Another leaned on a railing and pretended to read a paper. Eyes watched them from windows. The town's attention was a thin net. Someone threw a cigarette, butt, and said nothing. Someone else locked a door faster. At the second-floor landing, a door stood open. Voices spilled out. Harsh words. A woman's cry. Rosa signaled them to stop. Her fingers were steady. Hank eased his flashlight up. Marcus checked the back exit. They all felt the same cold. Hayes's men could be watching for them. Inside, the room was a mess. A chair was overturned. A lamp lay broken. A picture on the wall had fallen askew. And on the couch, Marta was curled like a broken bird. Her face was bruised and swollen. Her lip was split. Her hair stuck to a dark smear on the pillow. Lily ran forward and knelt by her mother. "Mama," she sobbed. Marta opened her eyes and tried to smile. She tasted of iron and fear. Caleb went to her and took her hand. It was warm and trembling. Marta's voice was small. "They wanted money," she whispered. "We couldn't pay." Hayes said. She stopped, the rest swallowed by a ragged breath. A bruise bloomed under her eye like a dark flower. In the doorway stood a man they all knew. He was broad, wearing a work vest with Hayes' logo. He had a soft round face that looked safe in daylight. Now, he held a pack of cigarettes like a prize. He did not look surprised to see them. He looked annoyed. "Well, well," he said. "Caleb, the Garage King. What a night." His voice tried to be light. It did not reach his eyes. Hank stepped forward. "Move away," he said. The man smirked. "I'm just doing my job. Hayes pays to teach folks a lesson." He flicked his cigarette, and the ember fell between them like a small warning. Caleb's chest tightened. The room smelled of bleach, blood, and old coffee. He felt the wrench in his jacket, like a hot coal. His crew had options: cuff the man and wait for a slow system, or take their own fast justice. The choice sat heavy. Outside, a neighbor peered over the railing. Jonah, the barber, watched with his hands on the balustrade. He swallowed and said nothing. Marjorie's thermos was gone from the counter. Someone had taken it out and left it on the steps. The town watched in slivers. Hank moved his jaw. "You hit her," he said. Short. The words landed like a slap. The man's smile stayed, thin as paper. "She fell behind on rent," the man said. "Hayes wants folks to keep paying. He sends men. That's how the town stays clean." He shrugged, like bruises were a broom sweep. "You people should mind your own." Rose's voice cut, low and fierce. "Not this time." The man laughed then. It was a small, mean sound. "You think you can come here and play hero?" He tapped his cigarette. "Hayes won't like this." Caleb felt something inside him shift. He felt the old guilt, the memory of Naomi, and the wrench's cold weight. He felt Lily's small hand in his. He thought of promises. He could put Marta in a car and go to the hospital. He could call the police and risk silence. Or he could do what his hands knew when words had no power. He stepped forward. "Say sorry," he told the man. His voice was calm. The room tightened around that single demand like a held breath. The man's lip curled. "Say it," he mocked. He pushed Marta with the toe of his boot. She cried out and curled further in. Lily screamed. Hank moved like a struck animal. He shoved the man hard. The cigarette flew. The man staggered. He reached for his radio. "Stop." Caleb's voice was a blade. It cut the panic into pieces. Marcus grabbed the radio with one hand and crushed it. The small device cracked under his fingers. The man coughed, shocked. Rosa stepped up and kicked a chair across the floor. The room filled with sudden, clean violence, the kind that ends things fast or makes them much worse. They were not looking for a fight. They were protecting a child and a mother. But Hayes' men were used to being safe. A scuffle tipped into shouting, thuds, a window rattling. Marta clutched Lily, so tight the star cloth crumpled in her fist. A neighbor banged on the ceiling. Someone in the street turned up a light. The scene spread out of a room, like ink on paper. The town would know soon. The question hung raw. Would anyone help them, or would the town lock its doors and let Hayes tidy the mess? Caleb hit the man once with the wrench handle. It was not a killing blow. It was a message. The man fell back, stunned, cursing. The rest of Boyle's crew, Hayes' men, came from the hall, faces like dull coins. They saw Marta on the couch and a child screaming. They saw the bikers standing between them and leaving. A fight would prove something. It might also ruin everything. Caleb wiped sweat from his brow and looked at Marta. He could take her to the truck. He could run. But there was a bigger thing here, a power that used money to bruise people into obedience. He made his choice in a single, quiet moment. "What would you do?" he asked the room. It was not to them. It was to everyone listening. They moved Marta into the back of Caleb's truck. Lily held her mother's hand and would not let go. Marta leaned back against a blanket, eyes half closed. She kept touching the small star cloth like it kept the world from tipping. Outside, the town watched in pieces. Jonah stood on his stoop with his arms folded. Marjorie came out and sat on the station steps. hands folded in her lap. Eddie stayed by his pickup and pretended to look at the sky. The teenage couple had their phones out, faces lit by the screens. Some people wanted to help. Some wanted to be seen helping. Others wanted nothing to do with it. Caleb wiped blood from his knuckles with a paper towel. He felt the wrenches weight through his jacket like a promise. He took Marta's small hand in his for a moment and felt how thin she had grown under the bruises. Guilt rose in him. Naomi's face in the back of his mind, the memory of a promise he'd broken. He did not want this child's life to become another unpaid debt. "We need a doctor," Rosa said. Her voice was steady but sharp. "Now." Caleb looked at the group. "We'll take her to the clinic. Quiet. Then we think." He did not want to start a war that would leave Marta worse. He also did not want Hayes to get away with it. He needed proof. He needed witnesses who would not fold. They drove slow and careful. Lily whispered to her mother. Marta tried to smile and failed. At the clinic, the nurse refused to look at them for a long minute. Then she took Marta in and closed the door. The room smelled of disinfectant and fear. They waited outside in the small hallway, the town's small jury speaking in hushed tones. "That man works for Hayes," Jonah said finally. "Hayes is a lot of things, but he's careful. He'll spin this." Jonah's voice cracked. He had a barber's gentle hands and a clean life. He looked afraid of losing both. Marjorie pressed a paper cup into Caleb's hand. "You can't just beat a man and fix it," she said. "You'll bring trouble." Her voice was small but honest. She supported them, but she feared the storm. Eddie spat again and muttered, "Folks like Hayes got friends in high places." His eyes slid over to the clinic window, as if someone inside might be watching. Hank paced back and forth. "We could go to Hayes. Smash his windows. Make him pay." His fists were clenched. The thought was simple and dangerous. "Not today," Caleb said. The words were quiet, firm. They held the room like a lock. Caleb's plan formed in small pieces. First, get Marta treated and safe. Second, collect proof. Third, force a public answer. He wanted the town to see Hayes's men for what they were. He wanted people to remember Marta's face. He wanted to break the rule that money could buy silence. A small win came like a hummingbird. The teenage girl in the car approached, cheeks pink with fear and resolve. "I filmed the van," she admitted. Her voice shook. "The one that left. I got the plate." She held out her phone. Caleb took it like a gift. The video was shaky, but it showed the van and a partial plate number. It showed 3 men inside, one with Hayes's logo on his jacket. Caleb felt a lift. Proof was not a miracle, but it was a start. Evidence would change the shape of the town's silence. It would force questions. They sat on a bench near the clinic and made the first plan. Jonah would put the word through his customers quietly. Marjorie would keep an eye on Hayes's men coming and going. Eddie would watch the rental units. Hank and Marcus would search for more witnesses. Rosa would stay with Lily until Marta came out. Caleb would try to talk to a cop he trusted. They moved like people building a small fortress. Each task felt honest and urgent. Each person had a role. Each role brought them closer to doing something real. But as they worked, the shadow grew. A man in a dark coat watched from across the street. He took note of faces and cars. His phone lit up as he spoke into it. When Caleb saw him, something cold went through his chest. Hayes was not asleep. He had people who watched even when the town thought it slept. The small victory of a video felt thinner now. The bigger problem, money, power, the quiet deals, was still waiting like a weather front. Caleb's hope hardened into a plan that needed luck and courage. "What would you do?" he asked softly, more to himself than to anyone else. The question hung in the air like a thrown glove. Someone answered without words. Lily tightened her grip on Marta's hand. That small gesture was proof enough for Caleb. They had to try. They would try. But the next step would risk everything. They left the clinic with a small, bright thing in their hands, a written note from Nurse Alma. It was only a slip of paper, a patient intake printout with Marta's name, the time, and the nurse's typed observation. Assault, multiple contusions. Alma had pressed her thumb over the corner like a quiet signature. She had not said much, only that some rules were for bleeding people, not for rich men. The slip felt warmer than the coffee Caleb still held. That tiny piece of paper changed the night. It turned the teen's blurry video and the witness's shaky memories into something a little harder to ignore. Proof was slow and small, but it leaned toward truth. Caleb kept looking at the timestamp. It matched the van video. It matched Lily's story. The pieces fit like bolts. Jonah moved through his barbershop the next morning and quietly told a few customers. He did it in his old way, softly, as if he were trimming facts into shape. Some men nodded and then looked away. Others, older, took the words and swallowed like a pill. Marjorie made coffee and left a roll of receipts by the register for anyone who asked. The town's gossip turned into a tool, not just noise. Caleb met Officer Cole behind the hardware store. Cole had a face that looked tired from years of keeping small peace. Caleb had met him before at the county fair and once when a neighbor's dog was lost. He trusted Cole more than most. He handed Cole the video and the clinic slip. "We need this logged," Caleb said. His voice was low, steady with need. Cole took them, thumbed the video once, and put the slip into a folder. He hesitated. "Hayes is a problem," he said finally. "He knows people." The sentence was a dam that showed the water behind it. Cole looked at Caleb like a man who had counted the cost of doing his job and found it heavy. "Then help us," Caleb said. Cole's jaw tightened. "I can file a report. I can set a lead." But moving fast, he looked around as if the buildings might be listening. "I'll be careful." It was not the shout Caleb wanted. It was small and legal and slow. But it was something. It was a step the town system could follow. Could they rely on it? Would the system bend or break under money? While they worked the slow legal angle, Marcus and Hank chased other leads. Marcus found a convenience store clerk who said he saw the van that week, not only that night. The clerk remembered the license because the van had run a red light while a child crossed. The clerk's memory added a fragment to the plate. Another piece fit. Rosa stayed with Lily. She spoke soft to the child, making small jokes about the star cloth until Lily laughed once, then sobbed, then laughed again. Rosa's hands trembled sometimes. She remembered a night when someone hit her brother and she had not been fast enough. That memory came like a cold wind, but it gave her fire too. "We will fix this," she told Lily, and her voice was full of promise and fear. Hank's timing was worse. He found a man who said he would never testify against Hayes because Hayes had fixed his roof once, and the man could not bear the loss of a favor. Hank's face shut like a door. Not everyone would be brave. The town was full of favors and debts that held people in place. Then, in the late afternoon, a muscle of the night moved. Caleb walked back to the garage and found deep tire marks in the gravel by his lift. The metal door of his shop had been scratched, a message crude and clear. Someone had dragged a heavy chain across it. That vandalism felt like a hand on the throat. A man in a dark coat stood down the street near the bakery. He watched them with a phone to his mouth. Caleb caught the movement, walked over and asked, "Who are you?" The man smiled thinly. "Just a neighbor," he said. His smile did not reach his eyes. He fiddled with his phone like a man with orders. Hank stepped forward, voice low and dangerous. "Try it," he said, meaning a challenge and a warning at once. The man's phone lit up as if confirming something. He left in a slow stride, nothing hurried, nothing clumsy. That smooth leaving worried Caleb more than shouting would have. Someone was reporting them already. That night, someone left a folded note on Marjorie's counter. It had a single line typed and nothing else. "Stay out." The handwriting was Hayes's kind of neat. No flourish, no apology. The small victories had opened a path, but the path was now watched. Evidence existed. So did threats. A town full of little favors and quiet debts might still turn away. Or it might rise. Would people choose the easy silence, or would they risk what they had? Caleb looked at Lily as she slept with Marta's hand around her. He thought of Naomi and the wrench, and of the promise that had become action. The stakes had risen. The shadow had grown. They had proof. They had witnesses. They also had enemies sharpening patience. What would they do next? Morning came thin and pale. The town looked smaller in daylight, like a paper set stretched over real things. Caleb met Marcus behind the bakery, where the owner left his back door cracked and coffee warm on the sill. Marcus's face was tight. He had something in his hand, a thumb drive and a worried look. "You find anything?" Caleb asked. Marcus handed over the drive without a word. "Store camera from the corner shop," he said. They saved the clip. "Watch." They went inside the bakery, where the oven hissed and the smell of bread helped keep hands steady. The video was shaky at first. Then a van rolled into frame, the same dark shape from Lily's memory. The camera angle caught the van near Hayes' units earlier that night than anyone thought. A man stepped out wearing a jacket with Hayes' patch. He met someone by the stairs. The two talked, and then a third man came, heavier, holding a roll of cash. The clip was short, but the timing matched the van and Marta's injury. Caleb's hope rose. This was proof that Hayes' men were there. He felt the scale tipping his way. Then the clip skipped and showed something else. The Hayes jacket man handed something small, like a phone, to a figure Caleb knew, Officer Cole. Cole stood with the small phone in his hand, talking low. The two men split apart and the van drove off. The bakery suddenly sounded loud. Clink of cups, the oven clicking. Caleb's chest went hollow. "What did you see?" Marcus whispered. Caleb looked at the screen again, as if watching it would change the meaning. "Cole," he said. His voice sounded empty inside his head. He had trusted Cole. He had thought Cole was the slow, careful kind who liked dogs and church fairs. Cole had seemed the one policeman who might keep the small town honest. Jonah had told a few folks at his shop that day and had kept his distance. Now Caleb felt the old town's net closing. If the cop was talking with Hayes' people, the path to justice would be crooked. They left the bakery fast. Caleb's steps were heavy as stones. He went to find Officer Cole, who was sweeping leaves by the courthouse like any Tuesday. Cole looked up and forced a tired smile when he saw Caleb. "Caleb," Cole said. "Morning." Caleb held the drive like a small, plain thing. "You been talking to Hayes' men?" he asked. He kept his voice low, but it held a hard edge. Cole blinked. The smile tried to hold. "Why would you ask that?" Caleb showed him the clip on his phone. Cole's face changed, and for a second Caleb saw a man who had been caught between rules and choices. Cole started. Then he shook his head. "I talked to a contractor. I was doing a welfare check. You know Hayes likes to help. He told me he was fixing something. You met him at 2 in the morning." Caleb's words were short. "With cash." Cole's jaw moved. He looked away. "Some men come asking favors," he said. "Hayes worries about people. He pays off some folks sometimes. It's messy." "That's a bribe," Caleb said. He felt anger like heat behind his ribs. He had believed Cole was different. Cole dropped his broom. He was quiet a long time. Then he said, voice low, "Caleb, Hayes has friends. I do my work. I can file. I can do it right. But you know how this town folds. You know." Caleb's heart beat fast. He felt foolish and raw. He thought of Naomi's laugh and the wrench in his jacket. He thought of how slow law could be, and how crooked money could bend men who were supposed to be straight. Rosa stepped up behind him and put a hand over his shoulder. She did not speak. Her silence pressed like proof. "What would you do?" Caleb asked, not wanting to sound like a man who only wanted violence. He wanted a map out of a maze. Cole looked at him like a man who had a weight he could not lift. "I'll file it," he said finally. I'll log the clip. I can ask for a patrol. But his eyes were not sure. They were full of the kind of fear that had nothing to do with a biker gang and everything to do with debts and favors. But we move careful. Caleb felt anger and disappointment both. The first major twist cut the ground from under them. The law might not help because the law had been touched. Hayes's reach was longer than they thought. The world they wanted, simple justice for Marta, suddenly had a dark underlayer. As they walked away, Caleb kept thinking about the star cloth Lily clutched. The small symbol felt both fragile and fiercely true. If the town's keeper could be mixed up with Hayes, then truth would have to be louder than favors. He tightened his jaw. Someone watched them from a parked truck and drove off slow. The town heard the quiet and would whisper. Trust was changing shape. The fight ahead had just become bigger. They met in the garage that evening because the garage felt like a home. The lights were low, and the air smelled of oil and bread from the bakery down the street. Marta slept on the back seat of Caleb's truck, wrapped in a blanket. Lily sat on a crate and traced the star cloth with small fingers. Caleb closed the garage door and leaned his back against it. He looked older than his years. He put both hands on the wrench on the bench and spoke in a soft voice. I should have been there before, he said. Naomi, he stopped. The name sat raw. He had not said it much since she died. This was a man who kept his pain small because it hurt to hold it open. Rosa sat beside him and touched his forearm. You did what you can now, she said. Her voice shook like a small reed. She had a scar on her wrist she never talked about. Tonight she took it out of a pocket and showed Caleb. My brother ran when he needed me, she confessed. I can't run from this one. Her vulnerability made the room feel honest and thin. Jonah came in after closing his shop. He had his barber's apron still on. He wiped his hands on a rag and smiled in a way that tried to be steady. I told some folks, he said. A few will say what they saw if they aren't scared. His eyes flicked to the paper cup on the bench. He sounded loyal. He sounded like a man who would stand. Caleb believed him. Jonah stayed late. He brought a list he had made from talking to customers, names, times, small details. He cross-checked the bakery clip and the clinic slip. At times he hesitated, like a man walking on thin ice. When Caleb asked him about it, Jonah put a hand on the list and looked down. I owed Hayes once, Jonah said quietly. My oven broke during a bad month. Hayes fixed it. He didn't charge me. I took it. I didn't like it, but I had bills and a rent to pay. He looked at Caleb, and his face turned small. I don't like what he does. I don't. But favors keep people quiet. His voice broke on the last word. That confession made Jonah feel human, not weak. It made him seem loyal now, because he had reason to be afraid. He stayed, and he helped. He offered his shop as a place to put the video on a bigger screen. He pledged to call people who trusted him. He seemed like the kind of man who would risk his reputation to help a mother. Rosa listened and wiped her eyes. Hank muttered under his breath that life was full of thin lines. Marcus kept checking the garage door, always watching the street. Everyone showed a fear. Everyone held a small wound. Marta woke and asked for water. Her hand shook when she held the cup. She looked at Lily and tried to smile. We will be okay, she whispered. Her voice was small but fierce. Lily climbed into her lap and leaned close. Can we go back to my school? She asked. The question was a soft, urgent thing. It made Marta blink hard. Caleb heard them and felt a new kind of guilt. He thought of how small things mattered, school books, safe porches. They were not fighting for glory. They were fighting so a child could go to class without fear. He rubbed his forehead and breathed. The cause felt clear. Jonah leaned in and pressed a thumb on a name. If we get enough people, the town will have to act. Allies make noise. Noise makes a place move. He sounded certain. He leaned forward like a man who wanted to be trusted. Officer Cole came by with a paper folder. He set it on the bench, and said he had logged the reports. He looked tired and clean, like a man who carried a job he did not love. He promised to try again. Caleb watched his face and wondered if the officer was telling what he truly believed or what he needed to say to sleep at night. They made a plan that felt careful and honest. Jonah would keep speaking softly to folks who feared Hayes. Marjorie would watch Hayes's properties for men coming and going. Eddie would keep his eye on the rentals. Hank and Marcus would find any other video. Rosa would keep Lily safe. Caleb would try to get a lawyer friend to advise them. They stacked small tasks like bricks. Each task felt simple and true. Each task felt fragile. Late, when the garage was quiet, Jonah walked Caleb to the gate. The night smelled of wet pavement. Jonah put a hand on Caleb's shoulder and said softly, "I'm with you. Always." He looked like he meant it. Caleb watched Jonah walk back down the street toward his lit shop. Jonah stopped at his door and fumbled in his pocket. For a second, Caleb thought he saw a folded paper in Jonah's hand. Jonah slid it into his apron and locked up. The light went out. Caleb stood there a long time and thought of favors, debts, and the small ways people fold. The room felt full of courage and thin as paper. Someone seemed solid with them. Someone kept a secret in a pocket. How much could a single promise hold when the town wanted to bend? They came before dawn like a cold wind. Caleb woke to boots on gravel. He pushed the blanket off and went outside. The garage door was open and lights cut the dark. Headlights from police cars painted the metal silver. Men in uniform stood in a line. A black SUV idled with dark windows. Rosa grabbed Caleb's arm. "What is this?" she asked. Officer Cole stepped forward, face flat. He held a folder. Caleb's chest went cold. He had hoped Cole would be on their side. The hope cracked like glass. "Caleb McKenna," Cole said, reading from paper. "You're under arrest for assault, trespassing, and disturbing the peace." Hank laughed once, a short sound. "They're arresting you for defending a woman." Cole didn't smile. He handed Caleb a list of charges and a warrant. "Hayes filed a complaint," he said. His tone had the slow rhythm of a man reading a script he was tired of but must finish. "What?" Caleb said. He looked at Jonah, who stood a few feet away behind a park truck. Jonah's face was pale, like someone watching his hand shake and not stopping it. He looked small and very old. "You signed statement," Jonah said, voice thin. "I told them what I saw." He stopped. His eyes watered. "They said they'd fix my oven if I cooperated more. I didn't want trouble." The words fell like stones. Marcus moved. "You betrayed us," he said. It was not a question. Jonah flinched. "I didn't mean," his voice broke. "I owed a favor. I thought." Rosa shoved past the officers and grabbed Jonah by the collar. "You coward," she spat. "You sold a woman for a fixed oven?" The officer stepped between them and warned, "Keep it down." News moved fast in a small town. A trucker with a CB radio had already told a friend down the street. Phones lit up. A paper had a headline by breakfast: "Biker attack at Hayes Rentals." The line of words felt like a blade. People who had stood on porches the night before now watched from behind curtains. They led Caleb away in cuffs, while Lily clung to Rosa's jacket. Marta sat on the bench, hands over her face. She began to cry in a way that ripped through everyone. The star cloth fell from Lily's hand and landed on the concrete like a small, folded flag. Why would Jonah do that? Caleb asked as they walked him past the bakery. He tried to keep his voice steady. He wanted to be angry at Hayes, at Cole, at the system. He felt raw at Jonah's betrayal more than at the arrests. Jonah's confession leaked out like a slow drip. Hayes had the receipts. He had a man ready to say the bikers had broken in. He had paid a few people enough to be quiet or to speak on his side. He had called the police and given them a neat story. He had framed the fight as a violent intrusion on his property. People who had promised, help called, and whispered that they could not be involved now. Marjorie, who had sat on the steps the night before, wiped her face and looked down. "I can't," she said. "I have a shop to run. I have customers who won't come if I'm seen helping." Her voice was small and final. A group of men clustered by the diner and traded looks. Some shook their heads. Others lowered their gaze. The town's silence gathered like rain. Rosa stormed the courthouse steps and shouted, "You let him get away with beating a woman. You let him buy people." Her sentence landed like a thrown rock. A few heads turned. A woman clapped her hands to her mouth and then turned away. Officer Cole read the charges aloud in a small room lined with gray paint. Caleb wanted to scream the whole truth, to show the bakery clip, the clinic slip, the teen's shaky video. He wanted to prove Hayes had men there that night, that Hayes had paid for violence. But every argument he had sounded smaller in the room. Then a man in a dark coat, one of Hayes's men, came in with a neat stack of papers and a tidy smile. He had a witness who would swear Caleb had broken into an apartment. That man's words matched the paper like two pieces of the same machine. Caleb felt the town turning its head the other way. The witnesses who had promised to speak now said they could not identify anyone. Fear and favors had a weight heavier than the truth. At the bench outside, Lily picked up the star cloth. Her small fingers smoothed it. She looked like she might never stop being small. She asked Marta in a voice that quivered, "Will Daddy come back?" Marta could not answer. Her lips trembled. The shame of the public story, how quickly it could be bent, took her breath. The town's sympathy was now a dangerous thing. Eyes watched, but doors closed. Caleb sat in a cold cell and thought of Naomi's laugh and the wrench on his bench. Betrayal by someone he trusted felt sharper than any punch. He had believed the town could be different. Jonah's choice showed him that people could trade honor for warmth, and that warm hands could slap you in the back as they bought safety. He asked himself quietly, "What would you do?" The question was simple and terrible. Would you fight the law that had been twisted? Would you trust anyone? Would you give up? Outside, the town carried on. The diner steamed. People sipped coffee and watched. Some whispered that Hayes had every right to protect his property. Others clenched their jaws and said nothing. The balance of power slid hard toward money and neat stories. In the cell, Caleb touched the cold metal of his seat. He felt small and very angry. He felt the star cloth in his pocket like a dull weight. The town had fallen into a quiet that might last. The real test was coming. Whether they would leave the matter to the lawyers and the money, or whether someone would stand and demand the truth. The cell smelled of cold metal and old coffee. Caleb sat on the bench and held the wrench in both hands. It felt heavy in his lap, like a promise he had to pay back. He looked at the metal and thought of Naomi. He thought of the night he did not run fast enough. He thought of the small star cloth on the concrete where Lily had dropped it. He felt small and tired and very real. Hours passed. He watched dust move in the shaft of light from the window. He had time to count mistakes. He had time to name them. He had time to feel the shame of Jonah's face when he'd spoken against them. He had time to feel how his anger had made people retreat instead of join. He had time to think of Marta and Lily sleeping in a truck while he sat in a cell. A guard brought him bread and a cup. He ate like a man who used food to fill holes. He talked to no one. He let the guilt do its work. He had wanted to protect. He had wanted to be the kind who keeps promises. Now everything looked broken. Rosa visited that afternoon. She had fresh bruises on her knuckles from where she had fought at the courthouse. She did not cry. She sat on the bench outside the visiting window and put her hand on the glass. Caleb touched it with the wrench, so the metal met her palm through the barrier. "You look at me," she said. Her voice was low. She had been the strongest among them. Now she looked like someone who had been pulled back from the edge. "We lost a lot today, but we still have each other." Caleb felt the weight of her words. He had been a man of action, Action had led to chains. What now? How could he fix this hole without dragging others into more harm? Rosa showed him her vulnerability then. She told him about her brother. He had been in trouble years ago. Rosa had turned her back on him for safety. She had a small fear that she would always run when something got hard. "I do not want to run again," she said. But telling the truth cost Jonah his oven. It cost some people their sleep. Caleb listened and felt the honesty cut like a knife. People made choices to survive. Some choices were cowardice. Some were pain. He thought of the clinic slip again. He thought of the teen's shaky video. He thought of the bakery clip. He thought of Cole in the frame talking with Hayes's man. The proof existed. The law had been bent, but the truth lived on small things. A plan formed, slow and stubborn. It was not a fight in the dark. It would be slow. It would be loud. It would use people the town could not buy. It would reach beyond the fences Hayes kept tidy. Caleb asked Rosa a single small question. Is there a reporter in the city who'd listen? He had heard once of a radio host who took stories from towns like theirs. He had a friend, a man who used to fix breaks in the city and who owed him for a favor. Could that friend help find a reporter? Maybe. Rosa's eyes widened. She thought of the risk. Then she nodded. There is one, she said. I can call him. He does pieces on small towns gone wrong. Her voice shook, but it did not break. Caleb felt new resolve, like something hard growing inside his ribs. It was not blind anger now. It was a plan that mixed law with light. They would take the bakery clip and the clinic slip and the teen's video, and they would give them to someone who could not be bought by Hayes. They would make the towns quiet into noise that traveled past the sheriff's office and the rental units. Say it, Caleb told Jonah when he finally saw the barber in the doorway. It was short. It was a sharp demand that left no room for soft words. Jonah stepped forward with his head low. He looked old. He had a folded list in his hand. I'll tell them, he said. His voice was thin but true. I will go on record. I helped them. I lied because I needed my oven fixed. I'm sorry. The words fell like slow rain. Rosa closed her eyes and breathed. It was a small mercy. Someone they had thought lost had stepped back into the ring. Caleb felt the wrench in his hand become a symbol again. It was not for breaking a man. It was for fixing what had been bent. He would use the metal in his pocket to remind himself of promises he had to keep, not with fists, but with work. He made a list while sitting on the bench. Names to call, people to protect, a lawyer he could reach, a friend in the city who could find a reporter. The teen who had the van plate would be shielded. Jonah would appear at the right moment and speak truth. Officer Cole's clip would be part of the file. Everything would be slow. Everything would be public. Outside, the town continued like it had nothing to decide. Inside Caleb's chest, a new thing moved. It was quieter than rage, but fiercer. It was the kind of resolve that keeps a person up at night until the job is done. He looked at the wrench one last time. Then he closed his hand around it and placed it back in his jacket. He felt both fear and a calm that tasted like iron. He had hit rock bottom and found a new road. What would he do next? He would make noise the town could not swallow. He would call on people who could not be paid off. He would ask for help beyond the place that had turned its face. He would fight with truth and with steel. The morning broke in a pale, shivering light, the kind that makes everything look unsure. Caleb stepped out of the station with the quiet stiffness of a man who had spent a night sitting upright, thinking more than sleeping. The wind carried the scent of wet dust, and every sound felt louder than it should. Dogs barking in distant yards, a single truck rolling past, a screen door creaking somewhere down the block. Rosa waited by the curb. She didn't wave. She didn't rush him. She only stood there with the same steady look she'd had when she said she wouldn't run anymore. Caleb walked toward her, feeling every step like he was crossing a courtroom floor. You're out, she said softly. The sentence held no celebration, only acknowledgement. For now. Caleb's eyes shifted to the horizon. We don't have long. Rosa nodded and handed him a folded paper. The reporter texted me this morning. He'll listen. But he wants proof before he leaves the city. Caleb unfolded the paper. It held a name, a time, and a meeting place. A diner just outside town limits, neutral ground. He felt the knot in his chest tighten. This was no longer an idea. It was happening. Where's Jonah? Caleb asked. Behind his shop, Rosa said. Practicing what he'll say so he doesn't freeze up. Caleb gave a low hum, half weary, half grateful. Jonah wasn't a fighter. He wasn't made of steel or fire. But he was trying, and sometimes that meant more. They climbed into Rosa's car. Her hands shook once before she gripped the wheel tighter and stilled them. Do you think this will work? She asked, eyes fixed on the road. It has to, Caleb said simply. Hayes controls the sheriff. He controls Cole. He controls the clinic. But he can't control someone who doesn't live here. Rosa exhaled slowly. Then let's make sure the truth reaches the right ears. They drove to Jonah's shop, its sign half-lit and hanging crooked. Jonah stood outside, clutching a notebook like it was a lifeline. His apron was dusted in flour, even though he hadn't baked since the confrontation. He approached them with hesitant steps. Tell me again what to start with, he murmured. Caleb placed a steady hand on his shoulder. Start with the facts. Simple. Direct. You fixed Hayes' ovens because they threatened to shut you down. You saw Cole meeting Hayes' man behind the station. You saw the paper they passed. You didn't know what it was then. Jonah nodded, repeating the words under his breath. Simple. Direct. Honest. Rosa smiled weakly. We're not asking you to be fearless. Just truthful. Before Jonah could respond, Caleb's phone buzzed. A number he recognized, the teen who had recorded the van incident. Caleb answered quickly. Did you find the clip? Caleb asked. Yeah, the teen said, voice shaky. I emailed it to the address you gave me. The reporter guy replied. He wants more. He said the angle shows someone in the driver's seat, someone who looks like the sheriff talking to the van operator before they started loading stuff. Caleb's blood chilled. Send it to me too, he said. The teen hesitated. I don't want them coming after me. They won't, Caleb promised. I'll make sure of it. He ended the call and stared into the distance. The clip wasn't just proof. It was the thread that could unravel the whole thing. Caleb. Rosa asked. They're deeper in this than we thought, he replied quietly. Cole wasn't acting alone. Rosa leaned against the car. Then the reporter needs everything. All of it. Files, slips, clips, names. A truck rolled past the shop then. Slow. Too slow. Caleb's eyes followed it until it turned a corner. He felt the same instinct he used to trust on long rides. The one that tells you when someone's shadow is overlapping your own. We have to move now, he said. Before Hayes gets word we're talking to someone outside. Jonah swallowed hard. If they come for me. They won't, Caleb interrupted. Today, you're not alone. Jonah nodded and clutched the notebook to his chest. For the first time, he looked like he believed that. They piled into the car, Jonah in the back, whispering his truth like a prayer. Rosa started the engine. Caleb kept his eyes on the road behind them until the shop disappeared. The town felt wrong that morning, too quiet, too watchful. Every stop sign felt like a warning. Every window felt like an eye. But as they left the last intersection behind and the cracked highway opened ahead, something shifted inside Caleb. For the first time in days, he felt the road not as a trap, but as a path. Caleb, Rosa said softly as the wind filled the car. Do you think he'll listen? Caleb looked at the horizon, pale, raw, promising. He'll listen, he said. And after tonight, Hayes won't be able to bury anything ever again. They drove on, carrying the truth like contraband, unaware that someone far behind was already making a call that would set the next fire. The diner smelled like hot coffee and burnt toast. It felt alive in a way the town had not been for days. People came and went. The reporter sat with a recorder and a camera in clear view. He had a notebook, a calm face, and the kind of patience that makes trouble show its seams. Jonah spoke first. His voice shook, but it was true. He told the reporter everything. He told how Hayes fixed his oven, then how Hayes asked small favors, then bigger ones. He told how he lied at the courthouse and why he did it. He said the words no one in town wanted to hear. I was afraid. I am sorry. The camera kept rolling. The reporter did not flinch. He asked simple questions. He checked the videos on Caleb's phone and the clinic slip. He put the bakery clip on his laptop and watched the frame where Cole met Hayes' man. He put it on the table for everyone to see. A courier from the city arrived with a thin envelope. Inside was an email printout, a promise from the reporter that he would go live on a morning segment if the files were real. He had already called a lawyer friend and a state reporter. The city would not be easy to buy. Caleb sat across the table and watched Jonah speak. Each true sentence seemed to unstick the town. People in the diner leaned in. Some came for curiosity. Some came because they had small truths of their own that suddenly felt safe to say. Then the final twist came like a hard bell. Officer Cole walked in. He looked smaller than Caleb had ever seen him. His uniform was neat, but his hands trembled. I need to speak, he said. He did not ask for a chair. He told the reporter he had something to add. He told the story of debts, threats, and a son in a hospital bed. He explained why he had met Hayes' man. He did not excuse what he did. He said he took money, and he said he tried to hide it. His face was wet with shame when he said, I thought I was protecting my baby. The room went very quiet. Cole surprised everyone further when he handed the reporter a small envelope. Inside were messages, texts, and photos that showed Hayes' men coordinating payments and threats. Cole had kept them. He said he could not sleep until he gave them up. The reporter stood and switched on his camera. He went live. The story went up the wire. The city station picked it up fast. Phones in the town started to ring. People who worked for Hayes read the headlines and stopped in the street. Hayes tried to shut it down. He called lawyers. He called men. He offered money. He tried to buy silence one more time. That night he came to the rental units with a lawyer and a few angry men. They expected fear. They expected doors to stay closed. Instead, doors opened. Neighbors came out. Some were small and shaking. Some were loud. Jonah stood in the crowd with his apron on. Marjorie held a thermos and did not step back. Eddie folded his arms and did not look away. The teen who recorded the van stood on the steps and held his phone like a shield. People who had once bowed to favors found their feet. State agents arrived before Hayes could finish his takes. They had the reporter's files and the printed messages. They moved with papers and badges. Hayes watched men with power he'd paid be led away in cuffs. He stood with his lawyer and realized money could not hide everything. In the chaos, Caleb thought of the wrench in his jacket and Naomi's laugh. He thought of Lily's small face and Marta's bruised cheek. He felt the relief like a rising tide. Marta stood beside Caleb in the crowd. She held Lily and the star cloth. She had dirt on her shirt and a slow bruise under one eye. Her hands were steady now. She smiled at Caleb in a small, tired way. It's over. Lily asked, voice small and curious. Caleb crouched and looked her in the eye. He put out a hand and took the little cloth. He smoothed it gently. It's not the same as before, he said, but it is better. He did something quiet then. He folded the star cloth carefully and handed it back to Marta. Keep it, he said. Let it stay with you. Let it tell you how people can stand together. Rosa hugged Jonah. He shook and cried like a man who had been given a second chance. Officer Cole turned himself in. He faced the law for what he had done. He also helped the investigators. He spoke about threats and who else had been paid. His choice made his guilt heavier and his conscience cleaner. Hayes left the town with his lawyer and a long list of charges. He could still fight in court. He had more money than most. But the town had seen his face in print and on television. Power had cracks now. A week later, the clinic framed its intake slip. It hung on the wall by the door like a small, stubborn truth. The bakery had a sign that read, in small letters someone had added, "Thanks for the truth." Jonah's oven was fixed by donations. People brought parts and paid for labor. He opened his shop and cut hair with hands that trembled and then steadied. Caleb went back to the garage and put the wrench on the bench. He did not use it to hurt anyone again. He kept it there like a tool for honest work. At night, when the town felt quiet and safe, Caleb would sit on his truck and look at the stars. Lily sometimes ran up and slapped the hood with a grin. Once she shouted across the yard, "They can't hurt my mama anymore." Her voice bounced and felt small and joyful. Caleb smiled and thought of the first words he had heard that night, words that led them into a fight, into trouble, and finally into truth. "They're beating my mama," he whispered, but this time his voice had a new weight. It was a memory and a bridge. He had kept a promise. What did you feel at the end? What would you do if someone in your town needed you? Let me know below. Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more meaningful stories.